Welcome to this panel discussion. First and foremost, those who are watching the panel and all of you who are taking part in this discussion. First, we have Alexandra Schiefert, a lecturer of the University of Vienna, Department of Korean Studies. And then we have two students of Korean Studies joining us, Fiona Tappeser from the University of Vienna in Austria and Maša Žekš from the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. I'm Sanja Struna. I'm also from Slovenia and I specialize in Korean cinema as a film critic. As you probably know, the Embassy of the Republic of Korea and its cultural department are hosting the online event Korean Film Week, A Century of Korean Women. This is the first in a series of 5 short films that include discussions on each of the 5 films in the program. The first film that we'll talk about today is also the oldest, made by director Shin Sang-ok. The title of this Korean cinema classic is The HOUSEGUEST and My Mother.
Thank you, Sanja. So I'll be giving a short intro about The HOUSEGUEST and My Mother. It was released in 1961 and is one of director Shin Sang-ok's most representative films. Shin was born in Cheongjin, which is now part of North Korea, during Japan's colonial rule. He passed away in April 2006 at the age of 80. After graduating from the University of Fine Arts and Music in Tokyo, he started his career as an assistant production designer. Shin's film industry career spans over half a century. So during that time, he directed over 70 films and produced over 100 more. He directed his first film during the Korean War in 1952 and soon became the country's leading director. The HOUSEGUEST and My Mother is an adaptation of the short novel of the same name by Chu Yo-sok. Compared to other films Shin released in 1961, it was more, intimate and a small-scale project. The HOUSEGUEST and My Mother is a melodrama, as you probably know, and it is revolving around the conflict between a traditionalist and the modern values. So, the film centers on the titular mother, a young widow, portrayed by Shin's wife and actress Jeon-hee, whose self-imposed moral strictures are appended by the arrival of the HOUSEGUEST Mr. Han. Mr. Han is portrayed by Kim Jin-kyu, a very popular actor at that time, and he also appeared in several of Shin's films. So, we're moving on to Fiona now.
Thank you, Alexandra. So, to start off, I would love to take a closer look at the mother, who is a self-sacrificing and very traditional woman, a role that is absolutely not uncommon at all in Korean melodramas of that time. Although there are moments that suggest that other characters in the movie do see her as somewhat of a killer, maybe even a little outdated. An example of this could be the scene where the mother meets her friend, a hairdresser, who thinks that she needs to maybe change up her hairstyle and even remarry maybe. And during that scene, it is quite, I would say, almost substantial that we can see that woman still wearing the hairstyle of a married woman as well as the garbs of a married woman. Throughout the interactions that are rekindled by her daughter with Mr. Han, you can definitely feel that there's an attraction between the two of them. And Mr. Han also confesses Alice, the widow, even though she would have the agreement of the mother of her late husband, who's now the head of the household, she refuses to give into that relationship and remarry, citing Confucian precepts against remarriage and sacrificing her happiness towards something that is seen as an outstanding virtue at that time. We don't really know how the husband died. We only know that he passed before Oki, the daughter, was even born. And we get to experience most of the movie through the view of Oki's eyes, who is this charming young child who is in this household of an old-fashioned Confucian ethics-driven family and just wants a father figure to cling to. I don't really want to go further into Oki because Maša will now talk about her some more.
Thank you.
So, Fiona already mentioned one of the interesting aspects of the film is that the story is told through children's eyes. So we witness a love story from the perspective of a 6-year-old girl named Oakley. The film opens with her showing us her drawings of her town. They show us the river and the streets, and eventually their house, which she also drew. This is also the place that she reveals that the house is called a widow house. She there clarifies that she is not sure what that even means. So this whole intro consists of her introducing us to her family that she lives with, her grandmother, her mother, and a housemate. We are in a child's world and in a house full of women. Naturally, Oakley grows fond of Mr. Han and they become friends. He starts to feel a parental role in her heart, and she somehow becomes this innocent 6-year-old matchmaker. In her playful mind, everything is simplified, which results in plenty of humor and gentle yet genuine emotion. She's not yet bothered by social norms or expectations, although she's already very well behaved and polite. So the film actually exposes the idea of how everyone's desires should be fulfilled, could be fulfilled if the world was as easy as a child sees it. Ultimately, the film is also about the 6-year-old girl trying to make sense of her world, and although we might doubt the possibility of the romance in the story, Oakley's confidence and persistence make us hope and discard the ever-present bitter aftertaste that may follow us through watching the film.
What is interesting about the timeline, as Alexandra already briefly mentioned in her introduction of The Houseguest and My Mother, is that it was made right after a very brief era of artistic freedom, which followed the fall of Syngman Rhee's government and lasted until May 1961, when Park Chung-hee took over the power. Even though it was made before the motion picture law, which completely changed the film industry for the next 2 decades or more, The Houseguest and My Mother shows a slide back into the trend of the portrayal of female characters that were depicted as chaste and followed the good wife, good mother type of storytelling. However, at the same time, at a very subtle level, it builds on that. Even though the story takes place in the 1920s, it reflects the modernization of morals of the 60s and does not stop at the depiction of relationships as they were in colonial times, which is especially interesting since we see so much of the story through the eyes of the child, as Fiona and Maša already mentioned. Even though it would be perhaps far-reaching to label Shin Sang-ok as feminist, he still finds subtle ways to provide a bit more agency to his female characters, also by showing how restricted they are by morals of old. This is further emphasized on how the mother is restricted to the confines of their home, while the maid gets to move outside of it.
Yeah, all women in the film are unique and quite interesting. We should not forget about the maid, as Sanja just mentioned. How the maid in the film gets to move outside of her house and basically has more freedom. And if other things in the film are a bit static, we get to follow her agitated path of building her special relationship with a charming ex-seller.
Thank you. So, and I want to add something on Jeon-hee as well. So Jeon-hee played this sort of woman, like we already said before, this self-sacrificing traditional woman in many films for Shin Sang-ok and other directors as well. One could even say it was maybe some sort of particular specialty of hers. And however, in the Houseguest and My Mother, I feel like she goes far beyond that typical characterization. For example, please think of the scene in which she parades before the mirror wearing Mr. Han's hat. she takes advantage of this brief private time and displays a more saucy, maybe even a bit sexy side to herself, a side that is free of all society's constraints, free of her own constraints. And yeah, all this is expressed visually by just wearing part of a man's clothing. Unfortunately, Cheon-hee too already passed away in April 2018 at the age of 91.
A respectable age. This wraps up today's discussion. Thank you everyone here, and to all of the viewers. We hope you enjoyed the film, and if you haven't watched it yet, we hope you'll enjoy this classic of Korean cinema. Also, if you're interested in more of our discussions, they are being published with the scheduled screenings and will also be available after Korean Film Week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And cut.
Wait.